Hey, welcome to episode 278 of Ugly Awesome Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Freeman, and at the present moment, I'm hoarse, and I also have a speech impediment, so you're going to need to listen extra closely. So today's episode is entitled Purpose in the Age of AI. Yikes. Purpose in the Age of AI. And this morning, actually, I talked to a kindergarten class, and so they were so kind and so full of energy and so wanting to contribute. And it's interesting to think how different their lives will be than when I grew up. I mean, already they have like iPads, something like an iPad in kindergarten, and I was able to show a PowerPoint in a kindergarten class. That's amazing to me. And at the same time, thinking about AI, I realize I have a history of getting really afraid about new technologies like that I don't understand. Like I got afraid about nuclear bombs and in junior high and nuclear war breaking out. But then that didn't happen. And then I think of that because I have fears of horrible things happening with AI. And you might too, but like we can have fears and then the reality of the situation can turn out to be way different. So anyway, let me bring on my guest before I talk myself out of having a voice. I'll bring him on in a sec, but first this.
Today's guest, Luke Cumbee.
Hey, Luke, welcome to Ugly Awesome Podcast.
Great to be with you, Jason. I'm so happy you have me on.
Thanks. So shall we get right into it?
Yeah, let's jump right in. There's so much to talk about with this topic.
So when I think of AI, I often think worst case scenario, AI making humans obsolete, AI taking over the world and causing human extinction. What are some other more empowering ways to think of AI?
Well, there's certainly a whole host of issues that come along with it. Some of the negative potentials that people have discussed out there you bring up, but there's hope that it can help us to create solutions to issues that we've never been able to have solutions to before. For example, there's one group of researchers who are working on using AI to help mute individuals be able to speak again. And they do something where they read their brain waves and then they mouth what they're trying to say. And there's some sort of connection that AI is able to look at and turn that into the words they're trying to speak. And then if they've had previous recordings of their voice, they can even clone their voice so it even sounds like them when they speak. And that's just one example of a new solution to an issue that we had no options of addressing before, but AI can now make that possible. And then in the realm of health and transportation, there's a number of different areas that people are hopeful that it can help us with.
So when you start talking like that, AI suddenly sounds very exciting.
Yeah, I like to look at the entire picture. Anytime you have a technology that's this powerful, you're going to have positives and negatives. The wheel came along and made transportation much easier, but it also made car accidents possible. AI is going to bring those same positives and negatives. The reason it's going to be people fear it so much is just because of how powerful it is, that it's just going to impact so many different areas in such aggressive ways. And I'm with you on the concern about the different ways that people might use this in negative ways. But I also think it's one of the reasons why it's important to educate the population on the the capabilities that it has, so we have a lot of good people using it for good purposes as well.
You work with high school students. You teach. Do I have this right? Economics, personal finance, and what's the third thing?
And global issues. So we tackle this issue in that class as well.
So what are you hearing from your students about it? What do they think about AI?
They have a wide range of beliefs and attitudes toward it. If there's a belief that exists in society, it usually ends up in a public high school classroom. And
Nice.
so if you've heard it, I've probably had students who believe it. There are some students who are using it, but they're really secretive about it. They don't want people to find out that they're using it. And some of them are using it for really productive purposes. And then others are using it to try and escape doing work, which of course could cause lots of harm. But I find a lot of students have a high level of curiosity. They're interested in what the future is going to look like, and they're eager to take that next step to find out what are jobs going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What sort of skills do I need to develop in order to be ready for that world? And as much as it's possible to look at students and think that they're only thinking about today, many of them are concerned about tomorrow just like the rest of us.
Um, there's lot of optimism in what you're saying about students looking ahead and really thinking about how they're going to fit into this new world. When you say students are using AI in positive ways, what are some of the positive ways?
I see a lot of students. I actually have a former debate student who is doing high level science well beyond my comprehension. And one of the ways he told me he uses it is he produces work and then he turns around and uses AI to stress test it and point out flaws and ask questions and to take another look at the product that he produces. And I know as an educator, I do the exact same thing. When I write a test, I will have AI play the role of my colleague, providing me feedback on how does it look? How can it be better? Is there any question on there that might not be clear? Is there any way I can improve it or write questions that get my students to think more critically rather than just asking recall questions all the time? And so using it as in an effort to push you further and challenge you more, I think is a way to actually improve our ability to interact with the world. But if you use it to replace work and to do your work for you, that's when I start to see it create long-term harms that are dangerous.
So it sounds like AI can really be a life coach,
Yeah,
kind of, uh, not a life coach, but an editor, colleague, constantly inspiring you to move forward.
absolutely. And I use it to push me in ways in many ways, I find that it's really useful, not only at pushing me further in the areas that I already have some skills in, but also in helping me out in the areas that I have absolutely no skill in whatsoever. So I've been in the area of debate for a long time, and I've been working on arguments for a long time, but I still use AI to help me to fine tune some of that work. But I also use AI on a place I don't have any skills whatsoever. It helped me to pick the color for my bathroom walls because interior design is not my specialty at all. And it's the first time I've ever picked a color where I actually like the outcome. So thankfully, AI helped me out with that because not my area of expertise.
Just this is a side note, but I'm curious, how do you go about using AI to help you pick a color for your bathroom?
I took a photo or a couple photos, and that way it had the context of what things were in the room that weren't going to go anywhere, the different shades of my bathtub and toilet, and the different things that are on the walls and the cabinets, and all of those different things. Once it was able to have a picture of the room, I then asked it what sort of wall color would go well with the things that were already in there. And it gave me a few suggestions. It didn't just say, go with this one. Instead, it said, take a look at these different colors. And so then I went to the paint store. I even informed it what paint store I was going to, so it knew exactly what the colors they had available.
Wow.
And when I went there, I had a list of 5 different colors. I said, can you get me these 5 colors? And I grabbed those, went home, and then I picked from the 5 which one I liked the most. That was my process, at least.
Wow, interesting, inspiring. But so AI can be used as a coach to really inspire us to expand. How do you see people starting to use AI as a crutch?
That honestly, I don't think I see it directly, but I sense it behind the scenes.
Mm.
And that's the big concern that I have. Students who show up with a big project that looks like it's really great and well thought out, but if you stop and ask them questions about it, they're not able to answer those questions very well. And it's very clear that they actually didn't go through the productive struggle that was necessary to get that outcome. And they just probably went to AI, had it do it for them, and then they took it and ran with it without ever worrying about seeking that deeper understanding. I also get some concern with students who use it to fulfill some of their social needs. There are more and more students who are turning to AI, not just to practice social situations, which is one thing, but in order for AI to become their friend, or even in extreme situations, become their romantic partner. So,
What?
so instead of having friends around the table that they're talking with and they're directly interacting with, they'll just talk with their AI and associate with them instead. And the thing is, it's really friction free relationship. You know, AI is always going to tell you what you want to hear for the most part, and so it's easy. But real relationships aren't actually easy. They're not supposed to be.
No.
So making sure that all of our young people who are now growing up with these tools realize that we still have to do difficult things, and that's a really important part of being human.
So many questions come up, but speaking of student who uses AI for a project and can answer simple questions about it, one of the first stories I heard you tell was during your TEDx talk in Sioux Falls when you told about joining the debate team in your first debate.
Yeah.
First of all, what inspired you to join the debate team?
Initially, I joined just because one of my siblings' friends was on the team, and he talked about it a little bit, and it sounded interesting. And I'm a competitive person, but I'm not particularly athletic, so maybe I could find my thread the needle and find my place, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
So please talk a little about your first the the experience you had at your first debate.
Yeah, the topic was on judicial activism, and I spent a couple of nights working on my arguments for it, and I thought I was ready, and I ended up going in, and I think I collapsed after the first question my opponent asked me. And then even after that process, I sat back down and the judge ended up looking at me and she said, "You ready to go up again?" And I'm like, "Wait, I'm supposed to go up another time?" Oh, I have to do a rebuttal speech? So I wasn't nearly as ready as I thought I was. But, I still enjoyed it. And my mom spent all of this money on these nice clothes. So I decided to stick it out and slightly improved each and every time, and eventually started to make some okay arguments.
And then you went like very long ways in debating.
Yeah, 18 years later, I was a head debate coach at Roosevelt here in Sioux Falls, and I've had a number of amazing students who have done extremely cool things. My great students make me look like a great coach, but they're putting in so much hard work behind the scenes, getting runner up at nationals, Julia Burke Award, getting top 20 ranking in the nation, getting full ride scholarships to all of these top tier schools.
Wow.
And I'm just so impressed. And I love watching my students go on to do great things. It's one of my favorite things as an educator.
So, it must just be amazing seeing that and thinking about how that will ripple out in their lives in terms of confidence and
Mm.
in terms of success and in terms of the vision for the future. So getting back to the student who uses AI to create this amazing project, but then can answer simple questions about it. What would be a way to coach that student to have a different relationship with AI?
Well, it needs to start with awareness. I don't think most students want to be someone who doesn't have strong capabilities. No one wants to be less intelligent or unintelligent. And I think more students than we're willing to admit have that internal desire to accomplish great things. But from an educator perspective, I think the important thing to consider is what the project actually is. So, up to this point, before AI came along, we could make the project be the paper that they wrote, the presentation, the words on a screen, the answers on the worksheet. But now, creating those things is quite easy. And instead, we need to make the project more about visible thinking, which is what the argument was in my TED talk. So they can bring in this fantastic paper with all of these resources and sources supporting their argument, but can they defend it? Can you ask them questions and they walk you through it? Or can you poke holes in it and provide counter arguments to their position? And can they defend it live in front of you on the spot? And that means that the words they turn in can still be an element of the project, but the real test is, can they defend it in front of us?
So this might sound like it will give students more of a chance to practice their vocal skills in
Yeah,
front of a room.
which is desperately needed, not just presentation skills, which I think is going to be something that becomes more important as we move into this new world, but also interpersonal skills as well. One of the things I've done with AI is to create simulations. And so in my global issues class, for example, we tried to negotiate the end to the Ukraine war with an AI version of Vladimir Putin. And I broke my class up into different groups and I had them all have a different task. So some were focused on returning the children that Russia abducted, some were focused on the land, some were focused on reparations, and they all had their various tasks, but they all had to work with each other and communicate with each other about what they were going to do to try and convince Putin to end the war and to come to some sort of peace settlement. Long story short, we never successfully convinced Putin to agree to end the war, but the students were constantly interacting with each other and without realizing it, building some of those social skills and addressing conflict and figuring out what are we going to do, what's our strategy, how do we move forward. So I believe AI allowing us to put our students in the situations we hope for them to be in one day without real consequences, because of course Putin wasn't real in this situation, but simulated consequences. I get a lot of students buying into that, and the learning becomes really cool to watch.
So they were literally acting with AI image of Putin who would say things.
Yeah. And I played the role of president of the United States.
Mm.
And afterwards, I then had AI who now has the entire negotiation between the class and AI Putin. I then had AI come up with news articles that criticized the class and their decisions from multiple angles. So
No way.
I had
Holy.
a British article that was, what would the Brits think of how we negotiated? Then we had a Russian propaganda news article, and then we had a US article that was in favor of me as president, and then a US article who just blindly hated me as president. So they had four different perspectives of how they did. And that allowed them to learn that no matter what decision you make, there's going to be someone who criticizes you.
So that depending on the news source, you're going to get a different slant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and because everyone has what they're trying to accomplish, which I think was one of the fundamental things when it comes to global issues is to understand everyone has their interest and their strategy for trying to acquire those interests, and that conflict is gonna come up naturally, and going into the different ways we resolve that.
Wow. What a powerful learning experience. So Luke, I'm one one of the things I am as a writer. I just love to write. Like how any ideas on how we teach students to write in the age of AI?
I think that having students write long writing posts where it used to be like a teacher would assign a 20-page paper, and that would be a really big assignment and a heavy task. And just completing the paper alone would require a lot of skill development in the process of writing the paper. Today,
Yeah, I hated those papers.
I did too, but I also got to say it did teach me a lot going through the struggle because it was tough.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
Now, there's a couple ways you can go about this. You could have your students handwrite lengthy assignments, and that would still require a similar level of struggle to get complete replication of the previous learning. I don't know if that's quite there though. But one thing I've gotten a lot of leeway out of is having my students focus on just writing a single sentence or one paragraph. Because in today's day and age, the amount of attention span that people have is not getting longer, is getting shorter. And your ability to uh, get someone's attention with a single sentence or to teach someone something with a single paragraph is really where the true value is. But doing that well is extraordinarily difficult. And I think a lot of people don't realize just how many angles a single sentence can go. I
Mm,
remember I served on this national committee for writing debate topics, and we would sit in a room of the smartest people I've ever been in a room in. And we'd put a single sentence on the board, which was the topic that we were trying to figure out how to make this topic balanced and debatable and great for the students for an entire year. And you'd be amazed at how many different ways you can write a single sentence and how changing a single word in that sentence can completely change the meaning and the impact of that sentence. And so allowing AI to stress test just a single sentence and provide multiple angles and different ways we could change this word or that word or have a different goal in mind or all of those things. It's the best stress testing tool I've ever had.
do you literally put the sentence into AI and ask them to stress test it?
There's different ways that you can do it. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But yeah, if you're just looking at stress testing a single sentence, I would put that sentence in, and then with the prompting process, I would follow it up with what particular angles I want to stress test it from. But you need to provide a number of different things. we always like to push role, action, format, context. So the first thing you can say is what role you want AI to play as. So you could have AI be a business professional, or you could have AI play the role of Abraham Lincoln or a political advisor. And then action would be what angles you want it to stress test from. And you can, of course, also use AI to brainstorm different angles if you wanted to. The format is how lengthy do you want the stress test to be? Do you want 20 pages of criticism, or do you want just a few sentences of criticism? Get straight to the point. And then context is all of the little details that really help build it up to an effective output. Things like, what are you trying to accomplish with this sentence? Who is the audience? What are the goals? Do you have any, who are you as a speaker? Those little tiny details. And once you give it all of those things, AI can craft some really good ideas to push you further.
Well, nice, nice. So it sounds like part of what teachers are getting to do is to teach students how to use AI with confidence and to get the result that they're looking for.
Yeah. And there are so many ways to use it that it it seems like we really need to get students going with this, because a lot of people think that it can do a lot of things, but they really don't see just how much it's capable of and how powerful it's truly becoming. And I think most people recognize and see like 1% of what AI is capable of. And we as educators need to stretch their mind and start making them realize that it can push you in new ways. And that takes some forward thinking and some innovation for sure.
Wow. Wow.
But I also say that I think it takes development of a really good mind too. At the very top of our education priorities is critical thinking. If a student doesn't have a well-developed mind, then even knowing a couple AI tricks isn't going to do much for them. They need to be able to give great instructions, take a look at the outputs that AI give, and then give great follow-ups, or even ask great questions and follow-up questions. All of those skills are really essential. And the other thing I would say is any skill you need to build a business, I think are now really essential AI skills, because so much of working with AI is like running your own business. Managerial skills, decision making, quality assurance, management, all of those things are exactly what our students are going to be doing moving forward.
What are some of the ways of teaching students to think critically in the age of AI?
I think the best way to do it is just to get them thinking critically as often as possible. It's not something that you can directly teach it to a certain length, but at the end of the day, putting your students in situations where they have to think is, in my mind, the best way to get them to develop those critical thinking skills, and to surround them with other people who are challenging them as often as possible. So the couple of ways that come to my mind are the AI simulations I've already mentioned before,
Yeah.
because they have to think through the process and the procedure. But the other one I'm a huge advocate for, and I don't know where I would be in my life without it, is debate. Getting up in front of a room where you have presented an argument, and then some other individual who could be twice as smart as you are, in my case, that was very frequent, they'd get up and they would challenge you for an hour straight on the arguments you worked for so long. And afterwards, sometimes they would knock you down and you have to go back to the drawing board and build it back up and try it again. But it's a constant revision process. So the best way we can teach critical thinking is just to get them doing the critical thinking as often as possible.
This might be a sidebar, but when you bring up debate and having to stay in the room for an LOL if someone presents counter arguments. It occurs to me that there's an emotional component to that. Like sometimes when humans argue, they just become angrier and angrier or
Yeah.
whatever. How in debate do you teach yourself and do you coach your students to go in a different direction than just anger and in doing something that's counterproductive?
It all depends on that word context again. If you are at a Thanksgiving dinner table and you are presenting beliefs that you hold near and dear to yourself, and it's even a part of your identity, and someone starts challenging that, that's where the personal feelings can really start to come in. But in academic debate, and when you're assigned a topic and you have to debate both sides, whether you want to or not, now all of a sudden you take the personal beliefs out of it. In fact, you can inform the students that this is not about who believes the right thing. Instead, it's just an intellectual exercise. And the judges who evaluate academic debates are directly instructed not to vote based on their personal beliefs, but instead who did the better job debating. And when you make those subtle adjustments, it allows students to really put themselves more intellectually into the exercise because I I myself am a natural conflict avoider. So when it comes to the Thanksgiving dinner table and having these personal beliefs discussed about, I personally struggle with that. But in an academic debate where it's nothing is personal and it's all intellectual, then it's completely different. And I come to life then.
Excuse me. That is it's really interesting. Yeah, you love debate, but you're a conflict avoider.
Yeah, some people can't wrap their head around that one.
I want to get back to something you said earlier that some young people are starting to use AI as almost a friend, a romantic partner.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on how we can encourage kids not to do that? Uh,
Well, currently that's a bit of my life passion is to get in front of as many kids as I can and communicate that very thing to them. But I also think that from a societal perspective, it's really important for us to put our students and even not even a student thing, even many of our adults who are going through a loneliness epidemic, we need to get individuals away from their screens and with other human beings as often as possible. And finding ways to encourage people to do that more frequently, I think is the best thing that we can do to help make it so no one feels the need to turn to AI in the first place. But of course, there's still going to be people who are going to try to do these things. And the best thing we can do is awareness for sure, at least from a interpersonal area. We can make each other aware, make our social lives open for other people to participate in them, invite people to do things, hold events, do all of those things that we've gotten a little bit away from as technology has taken over. So in a weird way, the more technology becomes powerful, the more I think it's important for us to return to our roots as humans and still interact like we always have.
so in a way, you're saying AI might invite us to may invite almost a renaissance in human interaction.
In my most optimistic lens, that's what I hope for. But the barrier that concerns me is that isn't always the easy thing to do. And I think humans have a natural tendency to always do whatever is the path of least resistance. What is easy? And going out and making new friends is not easy. It's challenging. You're putting yourself out there. There's risk of social rejection. And So if there's this AI alternative where there's no risk of social rejection, then the path of least resistance is to have the AI friend, which is why it concerns me that it might creep up on us and how common this might become.
So 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 yeah, humans do the path of least resistance, but you Luke have chosen to undertake challenge after challenge after challenge, and the title of your TED Talk was Productive Struggle.
As illusion of learning, the cost of effortless answer. So pretty close to that, yeah.
The title wasn't at all the title of your TED Talk,
It was in the arena of productive struggle for sure.
but you talked about productive struggle.
I did for sure, yeah.
So if humans' natural tendency is to pursue the path of least resistance, what has inspired you in your own life to take on challenge after challenge after challenge?
That's a good question. I certainly think that there's been moments where I have fallen victim to taking on the path of least resistance. And I think many of those times I end up in a place I don't want to be. And I've also tried the hard path, doing difficult things, losing a whole bunch of weight or going to debate tournaments, the putting myself out there. And I always seem to find that the things that provide me meaning and make me feel purposeful and truly great are the things that are the difficult things to do. And I think just teaching that life lesson to students, and they might even be able to reflect on their life themselves and recognize this. But you have to recognize that true success and that feeling of success is on the other side of doing something hard. And if we can just get that one lesson into students' minds, I think that would be really helpful.
And students get it in some arenas naturally. Like I think of sports like pushing your football team to go to state. That's really something very challenging. But in other arenas, it seems easier to slip into the path of least resistance.
Yeah, but I also wonder when it comes to doing something like football, is the motivation for them to do the hard thing, or is it because it's enjoyable for them? They like playing the game. And there's, of course, going to be times when something you enjoy is also difficult and can provide you a feeling of success and purpose. But I think the point I'm making is that sometimes you don't want to do the thing that is hard, but it's still important to do that, such as building relationships and friendships and doing the hard work that is academic, even though you have an easy way out to not do that anyway.
And I guess like one of the only ways for a student really to get get the awareness is assigning them a tough thing that they don't want to do, and then they get through it and they succeed, and they're like, oh, maybe there's something to this.
And that's the tough thing, because getting students to do something they don't want to do is if you figure out a solution to that, you let us teachers know, because we struggle with that one quite frequently. Instead, what we try to do is to get them to do things that are hard, but we try and frame it in a way that makes them want to do it. And that's not always possible. That's the problem.
Yeah. It's not always possible to make the medicine go down with a spoonful of sugar.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted to ask about something else, and had this brilliant idea, but then I lost it. Speaking of tough topics which students will have to undertake, you teach personal finance.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways a human can go in a direction they don't want to go in terms of personal finance. Well, what guide rails do you kind of give your students to think as they think about personal finance?
I was just talking with one of my colleagues about this today. They had pointed out that a lot of the things in personal finance are pretty straightforward, and some of them are relatively common knowledge. And the point I responded with was, in many ways, that's true. Although there's a shocking number of people who don't know a lot of the things I teach. But even the people who are aware of what the right thing to do with personal finance are not the type of people who are necessarily making the right decision. It's easy for us, for example, to recognize what it takes to lose weight, eat fewer calories,
Mhm,
exercise more.
mhm.
But just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you're capable of actually making the decisions necessary to do it. Personal finance is very similar to that. We can recognize that the best way to balance a budget is to spend less or make more. But to actually follow through with those decisions can be difficult. So I focus a lot of my teaching on the psychological element of convincing students why doing the right thing is beneficial for them, both in the short term, what they get out of it in the short term, but then also what they get out of it in the long term. For short term purposes, I say anytime you save a dollar, that is time you get back in your life. It's like you're buying freedom, you're buying flexibility, a time when someone can tell you that to do something and you can tell them no because you don't want to. And the more you have saved, the easier things like that become.
That's an inspiring thought, Luke. That's very inspiring.
Yeah, well, there's too many people with credit card debt in this world, so anything I can do to help that, the better.
If you were giving a commencement address at a high school, what would be your message to the students?
That's a good question. I think the first thing I would recognize is that the world right now is in a really strange place.
Mm,
And never before has the world changed as fast as it's changing today. And it's changing so fast that we're starting to become numb to it. And that creates a really interesting situation that is tough to wrap your head around. So I think just recognizing that and telling the kids not to let that get to them, I think is an important message to start with. But then, of course, you have to go on and live in this world with economic issues and wars breaking out and a potential changing world order and the development of AI and quantum computing and robotics and all of these different things. And you have to figure out a way to make a living, potentially raise a family, and find purpose in your life. And I think that would in many ways be what my message is, to remember what it is that makes us human, that our relationships are the thing that we're going to remember the most and appreciate the most, and to not forget that, but then also to be adaptable and a lifelong learner, where the world is going to change faster than we can perceive it in many ways, but to do our best to keep up with it, to learn about it, and to adapt to it without letting go of those fundamental things that make us human, which is each other.
that's amazing. Amazing message. I wish you were giving the commencement address.
Maybe one day.
Speaking of adapting, Luke, you grew up in Huron, South Dakota. What was the population of Huron when you grew up?
Is fluctuating between 10,000 and 12,000. In the early 90s, I think it went through a population reduction, but then it grew back up when I was in middle school.
And now you live in Sioux Falls, which the metro is probably, what, 300,000 or something?
Something like that, yeah.
And like, you're not only experimenting with AI, you're actively going around the country and talking to students and teachers and administrators about AI.
Mhm.
Will you please reflect a little bit on that degree of adaptation in your own life to get from where you grew up and the social situation where you grew up to where you are now?
Well, I'm always someone who enjoys a couple of things: competition, challenges, and things that are difficult. But I also have this tendency to, when I find something that I get into, I get really into it. And so as I've moved through my life, the thing that has been has changed. But all of those things that I get into fundamentally develop skills that I have. Primarily, the biggest thing that I got into was debate, which developed my critical thinking skills. But as of late, the thing that I've been getting into is figuring out how to respond to this AI reality. And I think if I were to have a perspective on it, and I mentioned this in the TEDx talk as well, that to pick sides between AI is good versus AI is bad is a dangerous path for society to go down, although it's the most natural path for us to go down, especially with the algorithms pushing controversy. But I think it's important for us to take a holistic approach and recognize that it's not good or bad, that it's good and bad. And how we accept it and react to it is the important path. And for helping young people, helping them navigate this confusing and changing world, I think is really important. So to go back to your question, I'm constantly jumping between different passions in life.
Mm.
This is the one that has intrigued me because it touches on so many elements of our lives in such impactful ways that it was just a big challenge that I couldn't look away from.
Thanks for being out there and talking about it and being passionate about it. When you talk to teachers, what are some of the most common ways they're trying to resist AI?
Good question. There's different ways that people will resist it. Probably the most common way is just to ignore it, to pretend that it doesn't exist. I come across that a decent amount. And then there are teachers who recognize it and they have decided to do the side choosing thing where they do whatever they can to eliminate it. And so many of them turn to AI detectors in order to catch their students using AI. But the problem with that, of course, is AI detectors don't work. And they falsely will accuse students who actually did their work honestly. And then it will also miss students did who did cheat, but they'll say, "Oh no, they didn't cheat. That looks good to me," because students have a bunch of ways to work around AI detectors. But I think the most common one is teachers who just ignore it. They hope it goes away someday, but unfortunately, it's definitely here to stay.
Yeah, it's not going away, is it?
Mhm. In fact, Senator Rounds came to Roosevelt, and I was able to ask him a question, and I just asked him, what do you think of the fact that there's people who are concerned that AI could cause extinction one day? And he chairs the committee that helps regulate this. So he's a pretty important voice in this room. And he just pointed out that if we don't make it, someone else will. And so the genie's out of the bottle. We now know how to make it. We can't put it back in. And so if we don't develop it, someone else will. It makes a lot of sense in terms of its inevitability, at least. I don't even think he was taking a particular stance on whether it was good or bad, just that it is here.
So that's a pretty straightforward response.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's some room for discussions on regulations, and that gets down the political trap pretty fast. But in terms of whether or not we're going to have AI in our lives, I think that's a pretty settled question. It's just a question of how much we have it in our lives and what we do about it. I think that is still an open question.
For someone watching this who's been kind of avoiding AI,
Mhm.
what invitation would you give them? Like, how might they start experimenting with it?
Good question. There's a number of different resources and free ones too. I know when I first started learning about AI, I just started watching some YouTube videos, and they can help you with a number of different factors and different ways to use it. And now I've come around to where I'm making my own YouTube videos. So you'd always watch some of my stuff, especially if you're an educator or a student. That's my little niche, at least. But to then, I think the best thing to do is to start practicing with it, to see if there's a skill that you want to get better at, seeing if you can get AI to help you get better at that thing, and to open up one of the AI models, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and to start working with it and seeing what it is capable of doing. It's kind of like learning to ride a bike. I can explain it to you all day, but eventually you just gotta get on and do it.
How do you mention your YouTube channel? How do we find you on the web?
Our YouTube channel is Groovy Education, GRUVY. And the content is primarily for teachers, administrators, and students, trying to help the classroom respond to it particularly.
GroovyEducation.com.
That's our website. The YouTube channel is Groovy Education.
Oh, so too like to it. So like that.
Yep.
What is the story behind the name Groovy?
You'd have to ask the founder of Groovy Education. I believe he mentioned it to me once. It was not particularly in-depth decision. It's something that came to mind and it stuck. But you'd have to ask him.
I once had a business called Hero Yes Productions, and there was a tongue twister coming out of my mouth, and I regretted the decision, but at the time I created the business itself. I thought it was really neat. But I mean I like the word groovy. Groovy. I
Mhm.
mean, I think it's a lot better than what I came up with. So that's good.
My favorite is Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway. He named it after his biggest investment failure as a reminder to him to not make mistakes. And I like that naming story.
Good. I didn't know that about Berkshire.
Yeah. He bought a company and it went busto and he lost a bunch of money on it, but he kept the name.
So Luke, I ask all my guests this: what does imperfect best mean? What does doing your imperfect best mean to you?
Doing my imperfect best. I mean, I think that is living life. It's just the definition of life, to strive to be all that you can be, developing as many skills as you can, falling on your face often, but getting back up and building some resilience skills. And there's a philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, who has one of the subsets of his philosophy is the argument that instead of running away from suffering, we should instead embrace it because it allows us to become stronger. It's where the what doesn't kill us makes us stronger idea comes from. And I think in many ways, it's a decent thing to keep in the back of your mind as we go through these daily struggles and as life can become so hard, to understand that if we treat it as a bad thing and we're trying to run from it all the time, we may not learn as much from it. But if we try to learn from it and embrace it and understand that it's impossible for us to permanently escape suffering entirely, then we might just become a better version of ourselves. So that's what comes to mind for me when you say imperfect best. It's the life I live.
That's inspiring. Any final words on the idea of finding purpose in the age of AI?
Hmm. Just that I think that while it's true that AI is going to have the ability to do many tasks, I still think that what humans put into our work is still going to be the part that is the most interesting to us. For example, while AI is capable of providing music and it's getting better and better at that, I still want to go and watch my friend play music. And although there was a robot that was able to break the human record for fastest half marathon, I'm still going to be impressed by the human and the fastest human running the half marathon, or any human being able to finish a half marathon for that matter. And so I think it's true that AI is going to be able to do a whole bunch of things, but it's still important for us to recognize that what we're capable of is always going to have meaning and purpose, and to reflect on that and also to be there for each other. Building relationships is so important.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Luke, and for really giving me and I would imagine everyone who sees this just a more in-depth way of thinking about living in our current reality, in which AI is very much a part of things. So thanks a lot for being on our Really Awesome podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jason, for having me on.
And please stay on the line for a minute as I wrap things up, okay?
Sure.
And thanks everyone for tuning in, and with Luke's reflections amazing and inspiring. And thanks for listening to my voice, which is right now a double. Is a double. I'm hoarse and I have a speech impediment. So hopefully, with any luck, next time you hear our Really Awesome podcast, I won't be hoarse anymore, but I can guarantee I'll still have a speech impediment. Such as life gives us so many gifts in unique forms. Anyway, have a good night, and remember, you are the best and only one of you in the world. You have unique purpose, health. Thanks for being you, and remember to smile.